Hi guys, welcome back to Books-n-Broadway. This is Ara Janelle, and the topic for today's book chat is Own Voices books. What are they? Are they necessary? Why do we need to be talking about them? That kind of good stuff. Now, some of you guys may know what Own Voices books are. Some of you guys may not. That is completely fine. That is why you are here. That is why we are together. That is why we are going to have this book chat today. I'm going to go ahead and start by first telling you what Own Voices books are. Then I'm going to explain a little bit about why they're so necessary to have. And then get into some of my favorite Own Voices books. So first things first. Own Voices is a hashtag that started circulating, I believe, as early as maybe like late 2013, early to 2014 to like now. And basically, they're just books are whose main characters are minority groups, okay? African Americans, Hispanic Americans, or they don't even have to be Americans, but minority groups as far as race, Asians, but not just like racially, not just a racial minority, but also minorities as far as like disabled teen, and usually it's in the YA community, so like disabled teens, the LGBT community, females in general, having larger females as opposed to having just the typical like thin female, those are Own Voices books. And the reason why they're called Own Voices is because they're written by authors who also are a part of that community, okay? Which brings me to my next topic. Books that are Own Voices books, not written by Own Voices authors. Now, another reason why it's so important to have Own Voices books written by authors that share that same experience is because oftentimes when you have, like, say you have a heterosexual writer writing a gay character, or you have a white author writing for a character of color, or an able-bodied author writing for a disabled character, oftentimes the intentions will be great, and the well-meaning and kind, but the execution isn't really so much, because I feel like all the research in the world won't make up for a lifetime of actually living in that person's shoes. And oftentimes when an author isn't of that group but decides to write for that group, they tend to generalize and rely on stereotypes a little bit more than they plan to, or a little bit more than they hope to. And they don't try to, but with these images already in their mind, like they already have like preconceived notions about this group, which sort of help to give birth to the story to begin with, and it bleeds over into the story. And to anyone of that group, reading that story, it's very harmful, because it's like, this is not indicative of my culture. This is not indicative of who I am as a person. This is not indicative of what, being a part of my community is about, and I feel that is actually the main concern with the first book that I'm going to show you guys. This is an Own Voices book. I consider this an Own Voices book. This is a book called Infinity by Jessica Cardo. And I hate putting this on the list because Jessica Cardo is a fantastic writer. I first became a fan of hers when her books were still on Kindle. She wrote a book called Darker Agency. It was Darker Days. I think that was her very first book. When I saw that she had another series out, I was like, I have to absolutely get this book. And then I read the back of it, and I found out that her main character, whose name is Corey, is a military brat. So I'm going to go ahead and read you the blurb. It says, nobody said that being the daughter of an army general was easy, but when her dad sends a teenage subordinate to babysit her while he's away, that's taking it a step too far. Cade is as beautiful as he is deadly, watches Corey with more than just interest. He looks at her like he knows her very soul. Okay. And when he saves her from a seemingly random attack, well, that's when things get weird. Turns out Corey's dad isn't just an army general. He's the head of a secret government project that has invented a way to travel between parallel dimensions. Dimensions where there are infinite Coreys, infinite Cades, and apparently on every other Earth, they are madly in love. Falling for a soldier is the last thing on Corey's mind, especially when she finds herself in a deadly crossfire, and someone from another Earth is hell bent on revenge. I saw that she was a military brat, and I was like, this is what 16-year-old me wanted, at least a little part of her represented. Except, doesn't really do that. First off, and it wasn't just so much that they lived in a civilian community, but I feel like she tries too hard to prove that she is the daughter of an army general. Like, she'll say things like, you know, my dad always taught me to have the heart of a soldier. And I just, that part is fine, But then she'll talk about how she doesn't want to be a part of the army or whatever. And then she'll go right back and say, that, I'm supposed to do this like a soldier. It's constantly reminding you, like, we don't need to be reminded. What I feel would have probably made things a little bit better is if you I feel like she did that classic author thing where she kind of told, but she didn't show it to you first. Like, show us that she's a military brat, show her, waking up in the morning and tucking in her sheets military style tight, talk about how she's eating her cereal amongst the sound of cannons booming in the background, talk about, maybe make her go out with friends or sneak out to a movie or something like that, having to stand up at the movie theater on base and putting your hand over your heart as the national anthem plays. Talk about eating your dad's MREs, because you're too lazy to make lunch or whatever. Talk about those types of things. Those are actually like military experiences, but I feel like she just kept talking about it as though she was reminding us that she was a military brat. Talk about hearing the bugles play at 5 o'clock, at 9 o'clock in the morning, also again at night. Like, talk about hearing those things and having to stop on base. Like, talk about those memories, I just kept feeling like she was trying to remind us that she was military, but she hadn't actually lived the experience, so it didn't come off the same way. And so, yeah, that kind of frustrated me a little bit because, like I said, I had all those experiences, and those were like the coolest things about being a military brat. And it just it wasn't there. Another thing about this book that kind of irritated me is that, she talks about falling madly in love with a soldier and how that wasn't in her plans and everything like that. And then she does mention that Cade wasn't like any other soldier that she'd ever met, He didn't look like one. He has like shoulder length hair, doesn't look anything like a soldier. And I think that kind of really irritated me because having the buzz cut, the regulation hairstyle, the regulation neatness to one's attire, that is non-negotiable. It isn't just that he doesn't look like a soldier because of this. He literally wouldn't be allowed to have a haircut like that as a soldier. It just wouldn't have happened. A lot of my friends that I went to school with, they also went to the military, and they all have that regulation look. It's regulation for a reason. So I just kind of felt like she didn't do enough of her research. And I love the book. And I'm going to actually get the next one in the series. I forget what it's called. But I really wish she would have tried just a little bit harder to actually get the culture of being a military brat rather than just thinking it was a cool setting upon which to base your story. Now, I'm going to talk about a story that I felt like got it right. This is an Own Voices book that is not written by an Own Voices author. And maybe I'm a little bit biased because she's my absolute favorite author in the entire world. And that is Most Likely to Succeed by Jennifer Eccles. Now, if I had to rate any book in the world an absolute A+, it would be this one, followed by her book Forget You, also followed by her other book, Going Too Far. Those are my three favorite books in the entire world, and they're all written by Jennifer Eccles. But this one I consider to be an Own Voices book because, as you can see on the cover, the couple is interracial. And the main character, which is this lovely girl right here named Kay, is African American. Now, what I love about this book right here is that she didn't constantly remind you over and over again that she was African American. She didn't base her entire book off of stereotypes about, how she could come into the house amidst the smell of fried chicken. She literally comes into the house amidst the smell of like baked cookies, But I also love the fact that it didn't whitewash her too much either, like she wasn't, the book wasn't about her being African American. She just happened to have been a character that was African American. And when I say that it didn't whitewash her too much is they didn't have a scene basically, and I mentioned this in my blog about this very same topic, about how, she came out of the shower with a towel in her hair, letting her hair air dry, you can't do that because, to be honest, African American hair of all types actually takes a little bit more maintenance than that. She actually talks about how she goes natural in this book, how she's felt great about it, but she's also felt a little bit ambivalent about it because her boyfriend was a little bit weird about it. How she takes her twists out at one time in this book, and it talks about how she puts oil in her scalp and her mom helps her do that. And I thought it was really cool because I was like, you know what? Like, it isn't throwing it in your face. I feel like it isn't like trying to prove that she's African American. It's just, she is. This is something that she's doing. And then she goes on about her day. And she has any other experience that any other teenager, whatever the race, would be. And I was like, you know what? This is super duper cool. This is a book written by a lady who isn't a part of this community at all, and she got it right. She got it right, and she didn't try to stereotype the community at all. And it was beautiful. And I have the other book in the series. The second book isn't an Own Voices book, but I actually would consider the first book in the series an Own Voices book. And I'm going to go ahead and see the name of that one was Biggest Flirts. It was a most likely or superlatives novel, and it was called Biggest Flirts. And I actually consider that one to be an Own Voices book too, because the main character in the book was Latina, and I just thought it was really super cool because, once again, it didn't just kind of shove down your throat, oh my gosh, she's Hispanic, speaking all this random Spanish in there that didn't make any sense to the story and didn't feel authentic. She just was Hispanic. And I thought it was super duper awesome how she was able to, include both of these communities in her story without making it feel disingenuous. You know what I'm saying? Now, we're going to talk about a few of my favorite books that actually are by Own Voices authors that I felt just magnificent. Okay? The first story that I have to mention, you guys, is The Education of Margo Sanchez. I was waiting for this book, mainly because the main girl in the book looks like what I envisioned for my main character, Portia. This is what I picture in my head when I see my main character, Portia, and a little bit of her best friend, Jessie. And so I saw this cover and I was like, I love it. I love it. So I had to get this book. And what the blurb says, you can go ahead and read that. But basically, it's about a girl named Margo Sanchez who lives, I believe she lives, I can't remember exactly where she lives. She lives in New York, though. And it's about this girl who, her dad is, they're a Puerto Rican family, and her dad owns two supermarkets. And she meets this guy in the community who basically kind of had like some drug issues in the past or whatever. But he's actually a really good guy who's trying to save their community. And it's about a whole bunch of drama that goes on with their family. And this one actually does have a few like poppings of Spanish and things like that. But again, like I said, it's actually written by a lady who is Hispanic, Lilian Rivera. And so I felt like this wasn't just her, like not knowing anything, kind of like stereotyping this. Like when she did it, it was genuine, Like I feel like you can write about these types of topics. I'm not saying that you can't write about these types of topics, but I'm saying that like when you do, you have to be sensitive to the fact you have to know about the topic. You can't just stereotype it, because I feel like there's a very thin line between writing about this type of topic, because it's actually like, it actually does happen in the community, and stereotyping this as like everybody in the community having these problems, because the main girl went to prep school, and I feel like depending on how this could have been done a very different way, where she would have been like pregnant and 16 and all that stuff. And I just felt like this was a really good book because it also showed the other side of living in that neighborhood. And she didn't live like in the ghetto or anything like that. She worked amongst people who did, some didn't, and I thought it was actually just very cool. Now, the next book that I have for you guys is a very popular book that turned into a movie that kind of irritated me a little bit because it kind of took out some of the cool parts about the book, and that is the book The Duff by Cody Keplinger. I consider this to be an Own Voices book because not only does it have a female as the main character, which a lot of YA books actually do, it has a girl who wasn't, super big, but she was just a normal sized girl. She wasn't the typical size four that I feel like is in every book. She was, you know, a healthy girl. She was bigger. She was voluptuous. She had curves. She wasn't a super skinny girl. And she also wasn't the super pretty girl, you know what I'm saying? But what I love about it is that she still had spunk. She didn't feel like she was this loser. And that's actually what made me mad about the movie, because I feel like in the movie she gets called this one name and her whole life falls apart, and she depends on this boy to help her see her self-worth. Whereas in this one, the boy calls her the Duff, which is the designated ugly fat friend, and she throws a drink on him. Like, I was like, that's fantastic. She was confident enough in her skin to be like, I don't have to change myself for a guy. And yeah, in the end, there is a makeover, but it's done like by her friends. I feel like it's done in a way that it just kind of shows you, you know, because I kind of felt like, to be honest, the makeover in the end of the movie was kind of like, yeah, let's change ourselves because this boy called us a name. Whereas the makeover, actually, the way it's perceived in this book, which, by the way, was a lot grittier than the movie, and the boy ends up falling for her, and she ends up rejecting him at first. I feel like the way the makeover was done in the book was also kind of just like, you know, yeah, you don't have to change yourself for a person either, but at the same time, you can dress up without feel and look pretty and put on makeup and all that, and be a bigger girl and look and feel sexy and feel pretty, and, you know, not feel like you're selling anyone out, especially yourself, just because you want to put on high heels, a short skirt, and a low cut top. You know, I thought it was actually really, really cool that she did that, because it showed, you know what, I can be both. You know, this was literally the definition to me of, give me a girl who can do both. You know, I can be smart and I can be sassy, and I can, you know, not have to be the pretty one, and not have my self-worth based upon the fact that I am gorgeous or that I dress a certain way. But, you know, I can also still like have fun and dress up and be pretty and flirty and feel good about myself because I do look pretty, and, you know, still have that other side to me as well. Like, I loved it. And like I said, it was cool that for once you saw a character who, you know, wasn't the super pretty one, but, you know, didn't take being the ugly duckling as an excuse to also be the doormat, or to be, you know, this sort of self-pity infused wallflower. You know what I'm saying? Like, I absolutely love that. She had guts, she had spunk. It was fantastic and phenomenal. And I think that the movie really, really missed their mark, because they could have had something amazing in this book. Like, amazing. The next book is actually a book I'm reading about now, so I don't have a lot to say on it, but I do have enough to actually give a review about why this is an Own Voices book. And this is a book that actually is a few years old, and it's called To All the Boys I Loved Before by Jenny Han. This book is a very popular book, and I had actually never read it. And then I looked to myself and I was like, why have I never read this book? Because it's actually really, really good. It's about a girl named Laura Jean who keeps all of her love letters to all the guys that she's loved in her life. There have been 5 so far, and she keeps them all in this antique box that her mom gave her before she died. And basically, I guess the box or her letters get out, and they get sent to all of these boys or whatever. One of these boys being her sister's recent ex-boyfriend. And in this book, if you notice on the book cover, the girl in this book is Asian. She's half Korean, half white. It is mentioned in the book. The author is also Asian. It's written in the book and it's mentioned in the book, but it's not kind of like overdone where you're sitting there. And I feel like she does mention her teaching her sister's ex-boyfriend to eat with chopsticks. She does mention that he had kimchi at her house first. She does mention that they're called the Song Girls, even though their last name isn't Song, but her dad's last name. And so she mentions these little things, but it isn't like on every single page you're, you know, having to dodge like Korean symbols, or, you know, constantly being mentioned that, you know, I'm half Korean. Like, it's not constantly, she doesn't walk through the house, you know, like my sister walked through her house wearing her beautiful silk kimono. Like, it's not, you know, like it's not like that. It's a story about an American teenager who's half white, half Korean. And so some of the cultural things, of course, do pop up, because when you're a part of a community, that's what happens. Like, these things pop up, and it's a part of your life, but, you know, it's not overdone to the point where you're just like, you're trying too hard to prove to me that she's half Asian, and I get it. Like, I understand. You don't really have to do that. I saw the girl on the cover. Like, I get it. I wasn't turned off by the story. But I am if you keep trying to prove to me that you're Asian enough, to have written, that you know enough Asian trivia to have written the book. You know what I'm saying? Like that's why I like it. Plus, it's just a really interesting story. And she has another book called P.S. I Still Love You. And I think that she actually may have come out with a third book in the series, but I'm not totally sure about that. I have to look that up. So I will be reading it, which actually is the thing that made me read it to begin with, is that she has another book in the series. And I was like, yes, honey, I have to read. Openly Straight by Bill Konigsberg. If you could tell by the title, the author's gay, and so is the character. And it says, Rafe has been out since 8th grade. He's fine with it, and so is everyone else. But sometimes he just wants to be a regular guy, not the gay guy. So when he transfers to an all-boys boarding school in New England, he decides to become openly straight. Instead, the transformation works. Rafe revels in a new group of straight guy friends and freedom of living without a label. But then he falls in love with one of his new friends, who doesn't even know that love is a possibility. Openly Straight is a funny, smart novel about being out, being real, and all things be yourself can mean. For some reason, I can't remember reading this book. I can't remember anything else about this book except for the fact that I actually loved it. And I loved it. I got this book not just because I thought that the blurb about it was cute, but I got it because it was literally like right in the midst of like my Glee Klain phase, where all I did was read like Kurt Blaine fan fiction. And so I had literally read a fan fiction about them being in boarding school, and so I saw this and I was like, oh my gosh, is this gonna be like it? It wasn't, but it was still super cute, So go ahead and check that book out too if you're looking for an Own Voices book. This has been another book chat with Ari Janelle. As usual, I make new videos every Fridays and Saturdays. I know that it says Saturdays and Sundays on my end card. I'm going to take that out someday. But just know that I make new videos every Friday and Saturday. And go ahead and leave me in the comments some suggestions for your favorite Own Voices books and why you like them, what's good about them, what you've learned from them, all that jazz. And until next week, guys, bye!